Welcome and thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. I am filled with gratitude, not only because this conference has just been amazing and I've met so many people and heard so many compelling ideas, but I'm also filled with gratitude because I'm sharing this stage with three people who I spoke to and who are inside the pages of this book that I just released. And the reason that they are here and the reason that I ended up interviewing them for the book was because I believe that they are living critical hope through their daily lives and in really unique ways. So I want to just introduce who we have here, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a reading and connect some of the ideas. To my left here is Vanessa Richards. She is an interdisciplinary, yeah! Vanessa is an interdisciplinary artist and community facilitator, and she and I actually co-created this session today together. So over the past few weeks, we've been building it out and thinking about how to really make some of these concepts land not only cognitively, but also in our bodies and in our lived experience. To my right here is Dr. Peter Wood. Peter is a climate activist and researcher who is doing incredible work on the Canadian Constitution and on the Canadian Constitution to recognize the right to a healthy environment, and he'll talk more about that. And over further to my right here is Nihal Elwan. Yeah! You can thank her for all those sweet treats in front of you. She is the founder and CEO of Taipei Foods, which is a Syrian women's catering company that you just had some food from right before this, so thank you. All right. So before we hear from them and get into some conversation with them, I'd like to share a few thoughts on critical hope and the role of seeking. And I want to also talk a little bit about some connected themes that I've been seeing unfold throughout the conference in the sessions that I've sat in on. What you seek is seeking you. Sufi mystic poet Rumi wrote these words centuries ago, and they are words that I open my book with. But think about it for a moment. What you seek is seeking you. Having spent the past couple of days in sessions and in the plenaries at the conference and listening to the keynotes, I have been struck by how many seekers are among us. Seeking something that is more just, more human, more connected to the community and to the land. Ruben, on our first night of the conference, in his keynote, talked about futurity and our capacity to aspire, the power of creation in the present moment. He talked about a sort of aspirational seeking that whispers, "This is not about you." Timothy K. Eatman, in his moving keynote last night, warned us to beware of the shrinking imagination. He implored us to imagine our path into a new way of being, to seek a future guided by a handful of values. And I say a hand literally here because he showed us 5 values on his hand. And the first one he talked about was hope. And Kari Wendell McClelland, in his soul-stirring performance last night, implored us to speak back to him, to engage in a reciprocity of sorts, where song in one direction is rewarded with movement and song and intentionality back in another direction. What struck me most deeply last night was when Kari asked us to reflect on a person who has loved us into being, who has loved us into existence. He reminded me that seeking doesn't just move forward in time. Seeking also moves backward. It's where we can seek the wisdom of our ancestors, and we can draw on that in order to carry them forward. and weave a future of technicolor kindnesses that we have been afforded in the past. Seeking, in other words, is hope in action. It is movement in the direction of that to which we aspire. I'd like to share an excerpt with you from my book in which I frame the connections between seeking and critical hope. When I uphold Rumi's truth in my own life, what you seek is seeking you, I imagine that object of my hopefulness always moving in my direction, so that wherever and whenever we meet, it will always be at the halfway mark. In this way, my efforts towards kindness or achievement or love are always doubled, and my moments of laziness or self-doubt or envy or greed are doubled too. Paulo Freire, the late Brazilian educator activist who coined critical hope, identified a spirit of seeking in his philosophy of hope. He said, "Hope is rooted in men's incompleteness, from which they move out in constant search." More than this quote betrays, however, Freire's conceptualization of hope, and indeed his entire life's work in education, was rooted in the quest for liberation from oppression. To experience liberation, one must develop their critical consciousness so that they can learn to read the world, understand systemic and structural reasons for inequality, and imagine and then work toward liberation for all. And given this critical consciousness that Freire so encouraged, he might also have been the first to question the power relations underlying the act of seeking. Seeking itself can be problematic in its romanticization. It can be a colonial endeavor, wherein the beyondness that one seeks might already be long occupied by somebody else. Somebody who would like to preserve the sanctity of that beyondness from outsider influence. To search for knowledge, as Western ways of knowing have come to understand that term, can be an act of epistemic violence if the knowledge is not the seeker's to behold. More than that, though, the very idea of knowledge can be too rigid and finite to align with ways of understanding that are situated in being rather than knowing. So when I reflect on what you seek is seeking you, I think of it as a call for mutual agency, mutual respect, mutual generosity. It reminds me to critically analyze my own identity, my own motivations and desires that draw me to whatever it is that I am drawn to. I aspire to a mutuality in my actions and my seeking. I imagine that the beyondness I seek is also reciprocally hoping for a relationship with me. And where that mutuality does not exist, or in places that would prefer to be free of seekers, I do not venture. And not because I feel personally rejected from that space, but because I have sacred respect for the agency and choice of that beyondness and the communities of people and more than people who embody it. Not every place is for seekers. Seeking, if it is your path, must be done with humility. And that means no seeker is entitled to anything that is not reciprocally offered up and gifted in return. I think of critical hope as the meeting place of two seekers who didn't know they were looking for one another. The critical seeker, the purely critical seeker, is guided by justice and urgently driven to beyondness by the anger, frustration, and grief of all that is wrong with the world. Climate emergencies, global inequalities, systemic racism, mass gun violence. The purely critical seeker reads papers, watches documentaries, and has first-hand experiences that illustrate a world in decay. And in turn, works toward a space beyond now in which systemic changes and individual efforts bring about more justice, equity, flourishing, and sustainability. And the purely hopeful seeker, they are driven by sunlight on a spider web. The ineffable connection that washes over a group of people, like it did last night at a live music performance. And the warm feeling in the center of their chest when their dog or lover snuggles in close and breathes quietly in their ear. The purely hopeful seeker watches their child show kindness to a stranger and sees not a world in decay, but one that is already perfect in its chaos. The beyondness that a purely hopeful seeker moves toward is a cornucopia of more joy, more purpose, more music, generosity, color, sensuality, and vibrancy. Critical hope is the meadow where these two unlikely seekers, or lovers, meet and become one. The place where two conflicting but equally true stories about the world are somehow made more truthful in their uneasy unification. Inside of that unification is born a plethora of alternative possibilities that eliminate false dichotomies and welcome complex pluralism as a way of knowing and being. For me, critical hope is a conceptual space that has given my fragmented selves a place to lovingly coexist. Thank you. So that was an excerpt, obviously, about these connections between seeking and what critical hope is and the relationship to seeking. What I would like to do now is shift to some of the people that we have on the stage. And I would like to first speak with Dr. Peter Wood to my right. And what I would like to do, if you're open to it, is read just a short excerpt from the book that I think captures some of your amazing work. Allow me a moment.
And how are you doing today, Dr. Peters?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well,
Good to
it's
be
nice
here.
that you make so much positive
Thanks for having me here. Is this on?
And so for you,
So after earning his PhD in international environmental law and forest conservation, Peter went on to work with the United Nations, Global Witness, and other environmental human rights organizations. He has spent several years leading a campaign to have the right to a healthy environment recognized within Canada's Constitution. First with the David Suzuki Foundation's Blue Dot program, and currently with a coalition that was co-created with several organizations, including Amnesty International. So Peter, I wanted to give you the opportunity. I mean, we can't capture everything that you've done in just a short excerpt, but are there some experiences you can share with us that will animate for people how you've come to your ideas about critical hope or just hopefulness?
Sure. I might just say that, what you just described is a long and winding road over 20 years, and it can sound like I've done some very different things. Working on the right to a healthy environment was very much a social justice endeavor. We were looking at ensuring that everybody from every community in Canada deserves to have equal access to clean air, clean water, and ultimately a stable climate. And that led me to a very different course of research and activity that I'd been doing before. Whereas previously, I was really working on nature conservation, so looking at protecting old-growth forests and large tracts of intact areas. This brought me more into urban settings, places like Sarnia, where we have high rates of cancer in Indigenous communities that would be totally unacceptable in any other part of Canada. And so it can seem sometimes, as I move between these two worlds, the social justice and the urban environment and the urban air quality and water quality, and then over to something that's a little bit more looking at pristine wilderness areas. Like, these are two different things. But I think the time that I've spent on these issues has been about convergence, that seeing how these things are very much related, seeing how social justice is related to ultimately outcomes for natural environments. And then I guess most recently, I've now started teaching at the University of British Columbia, a first-year course on land and climate change. And I think in the process of trying to explain to a younger audience, it's forced me to make sense of all of this. And so I think that's the first time I've really had to process it, and as I try to explain it to a class. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Teaching has a way of doing that. We learn a lot when we teach, don't we? Great. Well, one of the themes that really arose in our conversation that we had was around the role of anger. And I want to read a short excerpt. And our interview was a little while ago now, and you can have the opportunity to speak back to it or see if it has sort of changed since then. So you said, "For me, the way I get over eco-anxiety is really through action. First, I get angry and frustrated, but then I can't stay there because anger without action will burn you. I try to channel that and put it into a strategic, action-oriented plan. When I have this conversation with people about anger, they feel so relieved, like they've been given permission to be angry. Especially in environmental organizations where we're trained to avoid messaging that is doom and gloom. They tell us, focus on the positivity, and I think that's quite dangerous. If people are telling you that the anger you feel is a negative emotion and the onus is on you to have a positive outlook, even despite having some very legitimate reasons to be angry, or that we need to put a positive spin on that, that is gaslighting." So I pulled that part because I think you're speaking to some sort of like emotional censoring around the climate movement. So I wonder if you could talk to that a little bit and how anger plays into your work.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that how pervasive anxiety, depression is around climate change. We are bombarded daily with some pretty dark outlooks for our condition, for humanity. And what are we supposed to do with that information? We have this option of feeling very, very sad, feeling anxious. Depression is a very, very common response to being overwhelmed. And what brought me to say what I did in the book, I think, is because at my organization, at the Suzuki Foundation, we actually had a climate grief meetup group that met once a month, and for an hour and a half would just sit and discuss their feelings of feeling grief. And I attended one of those, and I really appreciated that these people were how much they were hurting, and that they really found solace in discussing those feelings and grief. But I realized I didn't. I actually left feeling worse. And what I realized what helped me was if I was feeling angry, to allow myself to feel that anger and understand and explore it, and to channel it, to ultimately to tap into it. And I realized that this is a source of motivation. But as I mentioned, it's not enough just to feel angry at something. You have to develop a way to channel it and find community in it, to find other people that feel the same way you do, to say, hey, we can do this strategic action that will be an outlet for that anger. And it's really important. And later on, I found out there's actually a study, an Australian study that was done, Stanley et al. 2021, just on the top of my mind, that I keep referring to, and I really recommend you look it up, because it actually documents that allowing yourself to feel anger is a great way to
You sent that to me after our interview, I think. Yeah.
So I highly recommend checking it out. it really shows how you can find a source of energy and more motivation and more community around channeling that, instead of feeling bad or being told that you have negative feelings and you should avoid talking about the doom and gloom, avoid talking about pointing fingers, names and addresses of people doing bad things, which as Canadians we're often told, you know, be polite, avoid difficult conversations. Right. And I would suggest that leaning into those difficult conversations is one of the best ways to channel, you know, your feelings into action. Yeah.
It's interesting because hope is often positioned as this like very positive emotion. I think what critical hope brings into being is space and spaciousness for feelings like anger and grief. And I think what you're speaking to is a living out of some of that anger in order to generate action.
And I think absolutely. And when I think about for my, you know, hope is, and we're literally trying to change the Constitution, which is like no, it doesn't happen. Right? So the whole thing is like from the get-go, we were told it's not going to happen. We mobilized 100,000 people. We got 150 members of Parliament, you know, to sign a pledge. All these things were hopeful actions, as we are being told that this is very unlikely that this will happen. But the good news, we just are right now at the cusp of getting a piece of legislation passed that would be the right to a healthy environment would be recognized, at least in law, not in the Constitution, but in law as a first step. And I think, yeah, yay. And that only was because of, you know, I don't know if it passes for critical hope, but it was hope knowing that even if we failed, it was worth doing anyway. Yeah.
And always ask for more than you think you're going to get, right?
Right, shoot for the stars.
Yeah, shoot for the stars. Great. Well, thank you for sharing these experiences. And I know Vanessa is guiding us through some somatic and interactive experiences to grapple with some of the ideas that we're talking about today. So I'm going to hand it off to Vanessa.
Perfecto. So, who here's been angry? Let me hear the angry people in the house. What? Right. Okay. So, what I would like to do with you today is make maybe a little 3-minute response after Peter, and then after Nihal, and then I'll have a conversation and we'll do something else. So you are welcome at any point to refuse my invitation. You are also welcome to say yes to a community experience, all you community engaged researchers. So I'm going to invite you to, so I've been thinking a lot about the role of the vagus nerve in the individual and in the society, and how do we cool and calm a frantic society? How might we individually be able to respond to our anger and then be in action about it? So I thought we could try some of that now. I thought, am I really ready to stir up a bunch of people into anger? Can I tidy that up in 2 minutes? But what I wanted to suggest is that I can't. But what I could do is invite you to have, so I think this microphone just died because it was on a 1 bar before. And then maybe Nihal could get a new one afterwards. So I did catch COVID a second time from a microphone, just saying, people. Yeah. Which is also the first time I've used notes. This is a COVID thing for me. Like, I've never had, like, these cards, but I kind of like it. So during these last 2 years, one of the things I've also been thinking about is anger. And I wanted to share with you a few things that might be helpful for you as you navigate your own work. And I know for myself, I'm learning to roller skate right now. Because when I was a teenager, I just smoked on the side of the roller rink because the skates didn't fit my wide foot. And so when I went to try again and I put the skates on and I felt like I was 14 because they didn't fit and it was terrible and I don't smoke anymore and I didn't know what to do. But what I was sort of fascinated with is how a little bit of pain took me right back to a very long time ago. And also, it was this feeling that I had just a little bit in my body of like what it is to roller skate, this kind of smooth thing that I was really aiming for, that even today, I'm like, yeah, that's the feeling in my body I'm going for. So I'm interested in what is the felt sensation that can get us to the emotional places, the intellectual places, the way of reminding ourselves who we want to be and where we want to be. So towards that, I'm going to invite you to just feel your chair. Yeah, I'll do this with you. Just, yeah, feel the chair. Like, if you could uncross your feet. Stephen, you want to try? Sit down there beside Jim or something and do the exercise with me? No, he says, like I said, you don't have to do what I suggest. So just feel the chair. Feel how your thighs and your sit bones are supported by this chair, and how your bones in varying degrees are stacking up and supporting your back and your internal machines. This chair was built to support you. Feel into that. You can lean back on it. It'll hold you. Rest. Let's take 3 breaths into this sitting. And from a place of being rested, we can get into action. Maybe feels like, oh, I don't want to do anything now. I want to sit. But I'm going to invite you to get up. Stand up. And feel your rested backside over your thighs and over your feet. You're strong. You're capable. Now you can be in action. Oh my gosh, if I was to say, stand and now take a step forward, for most of us, it'd be like, take a step backward. And we might feel TRAPPED. I also learned to spell. So what should we do? Can't move forward, can't move back. We're standing ready for action. What could we do? Jump, yeah. Jump. Could also move laterally. Move your left foot over. Nice. And then again. How does the world look from there? You could also move your body at like, is that 45 degrees? Yeah, that. Like heading in, though you could walk down the aisle. So all we did is just rotate. Thank you, Jim. Oh, now if we took a left foot forward, we could move our right foot forward. So perspective changing, like when you feel trapped, go lateral, go 90. Now I'm going to invite you to face towards us at the front of the room, or maybe we're at the back of the room and you're facing backwards. Yeah. I'm going to invite you back into your chair. It's still waiting for you. Oh, and you could take any chair you wanted at this point, too. Habitual or not. This is your choice each time. Do you take the same place, sit in the same place? What is the opportunity to sit where you're at? To stand where you are? Can't move forward, can't move back. In roller skating, we call this a crossover. Right? Or, I'm just like so. Did you feel a little bit of relief when you turned this way? Yeah, so maybe remember that next time you're feeling just angry, because anger is a great indicator for you're ready for action. Right? And when you're ready for action and you're rested, because you've been sat down properly, taking rest, then you have fuel in your tank, right? Because just being angry and exhausted, how effective? Angry and rested? Angry and able to move laterally? Yeah? Okay.
May I ask you one question?
Yes, Stephen.
And I was going to ask you this, because is this really important because people go through it all the time. The downtown east side has many challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And people get angry and they get restless. And we're trying to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do this in a neighborhood that's so complex? Do you think
Yeah.
one idea that may help us move forward?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate that question. So one of the reasons why, like, my anger has motivated my work and my choices completely. And when we are working collectively and collaboratively, like Stephen and I, if we were to do something together, if you were angry, maybe I would have an opportunity to speak to you about what you were angry about. I would ask you more about it. I would recognize that I'm hearing you, and all of these kind of, like, what do you call this? Nonviolent communication. But mostly, I'd see if we could sing. I'd see if we could sit. I'd see if we could walk a little. And if I had, sometimes it's really good to carry cigarettes. And then if somebody's quite upset, sometimes it's nice to offer them a cigarette. And that will be a gift if they don't have one. It'll be a sense that somebody's being cared for, and if they are a smoker, and a lot of people who are living, particularly in the downtown east side, and for some reason there's something, not for some reason, so tobacco is a sacred plant, right? We use it in ceremony because it offers a medicine, and it offers a medicine when you've been living with mental health needs, which is why you'll see a lot of folks with mental health needs smoking cigarettes. It's the medicine of tobacco. So that's why it's good to carry and good to offer. And then I would say the best thing about being angry is to not be afraid of other people's anger and stay at arm's length.
And thank you so much. And my real name is Paul. But
Paul, why do I call you Stephen? I'm sorry.
because I told you that when I first met you.
Right, okay. High five. I'm done. We got to keep it rolling. Thank you.
I always say that
I've met your kind before.
when I was in my hiatus. So want to try and change your life
Yeah,
by being honest. And that's a lot for a lot of people.
yeah.
Honesty against trust. Yeah, are you honest or are you going to trust the person? It's a very hard call.
It is. Thank you, Paul.
So much for that speech and you take it.
Thank you, Paul.
You were right, based on what you told me.
There's still people that come and say, hi Steve, how you doing? I'm like,
Paul, we're going to keep it rolling. Thank you. We'll talk after.
All right, moving on. Great. Okay, so we have moved past the anger bit of this, and we're going to move on to thinking about nourishment and food. And Nihal and I met a few years ago. Am introduced us on the sidewalk on a rainy night, and she emerged from under her umbrella, and she was like a ray of sunshine. But I think before I met you, I had tasted mamara sauce, or mamara dip. And I remember where I was sitting and who I was sitting with, because it was unlike anything I had ever tasted, and it was from Taipei. And I think that sort of surfaces how food can make us be present in the moment that we're in. And you talk a little bit in the book about how food can have all of these community building and presence characteristics to it. So I wonder if, to begin with, you could tell us about the creation of Taipei and what your role in it was and how it came to be.
Thank you so much, Kari. Is this working? Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Kari, and thank you, for introducing us. So how did Taipei come to being? As probably most of you know, in 2015, Canada welcomed 25,000 Syrian refugees who arrived here on Canadian shores seeking shelter, safety, and a new life, after the civil war that ravaged through Syria. And like everyone, I was watching the news and feeling very moved and feeling very sad and sort of not knowing what to do. And then at one point, I felt like I needed to volunteer to help the newcomer family. So I called ISS of BC, and I said, I'd like to volunteer. And so they sent me to do some interpretation. And I remember going to a motel, I forget the name of the motel now, on Kingsway, meeting families that had literally just arrived, and talking to the mothers and the dads and the families, and just seeing the look in their eyes, and seeing how everything seemed new and everything seemed foreign, and sort of the culture shock and all of these feelings that you can see on a human being that is a refugee who had just been planted somewhere new. And so that really stayed with me. Then I had a baby, and then in 2016 I was still having this conversation with one of my neighbors, thinking what can we possibly do to help Syrian newcomers. And now I'm not Syrian myself, I'm Egyptian, but if you're someone who comes from the Middle East, you would know that Syria is the culinary capital of the region. If you go anywhere in the Middle East and you say Syrian food, everybody goes, oh my God, that's got to be amazing food. And so, you know, this conversation led me to thinking that maybe we can use food as a medium to help newcomers meet you know, fellow Canadians, or people that they're interacting with, but they're not able to really interact with because of the language barriers. And so, I mean, my hopes at the time, or my dream, was very limited. I was thinking that maybe we can put together a dinner and invite some Syrian women to cook for my, you know, the folks in my building or my block or something, so that they could meet some locals and feel welcomed. And so again, I called up ISSBC and I said, can you connect me with some Syrian women who would like to cook? And we put together a dinner. So I called up some Syrian women. I called up 4 of them, and the 4 of them said yes. We borrowed a local restaurant, Tamam, the Palestinian restaurant here. We borrowed Tamam for the evening. We created a Facebook invite and, you know, told people to come and try Syrian food. And I have to tell you, it just blew my mind that the tickets for that event were gone in no time, and really nobody knew at the time what Syrian food was and what they were going to get, you know, at that dinner. And so I remember that evening very well. The wonderful Syrian women that were putting together this dinner, I remember them having put together the buffet and taking a step back and waiting for the reaction of people. And then, you know, people would serve themselves time and time again, and everybody loved the food, and they would go up to the ladies and hug them. And so the ladies had a great time, and then at the end of that dinner, they said, can we do this again? And from that moment, I realized that these women are here, they're here to stay, and they would love to do something that make them feel productive, make them feel like they're productive members of society, that can help them integrate, and at the same time, they had a medium, which is their amazing culinary skills, and they had a very receptive audience, which is, you know, everybody who's tried Thai-based food or who would like to try Thai-based food. And so we put together a series of Thai-based pop-up dinner events where we would invite 100, 150 folks to come and try our food. The events were always sold out, which was absolutely incredible. And again, people didn't know what they were going to get. We never announced the items, the food items, ahead of time. People would go up to the ladies and hug them and cry and express so many beautiful emotions of empathy and welcoming and warmth. And all of that was centered around food. So this is a very long-winded way of saying that food was the center around which all of this developed. Our ladies' integration, them finding employment, them feeling anchored, them finding each other as friends, and people knowing what it means to get to know Syrian refugees and know a little bit about their culture through their food.
Beautiful. I love that story on so many levels, and you did share that with me earlier. And I was hoping to read a little excerpt that you said, and then I'll offer you a chance to respond to it. You said, eating together is a way to strengthen a community's social fabric, especially in a country like Syria, where people's living quarters often entail a courtyard. So all these people would gather in a courtyard and eat together, and a tradition is to bring food and go eat with your neighbor's family. Yeah. And then they would return the favor and bring food to you. And so food is never taken alone. Food is eaten together to strengthen ties with your community. I'm wondering if you have further reflections on how, I guess, the ways that food can connect people. And there is the act of cooking, and there's the act of eating together. There are so many things that happen around food.
I mean, I have to say, through my work at Taipei, I've been witnessing how food can strengthen human relationships and a community in so many beautiful ways. I'm going to start with, I'm going to try to give you an image of what things are like in our Taipei kitchen. So every one of the women I work with, I met her a few months into her arrival into Canada. And so she would come into our kitchen, and then gradually she would make friends with other women who are in this kitchen. And they would cook together, they would exchange recipes, they would exchange memories about what this food meant to them. When did they cook this dish? What celebration or event or wedding would encourage them to make this recipe or prepare that recipe? And then they would bicker over whether the recipe executed in Aleppo is better than the one executed in Damascus, and whether more cumin or less cumin. All of these conversations around food and remembering their, I'm going to call it their previous life or their homeland, strengthened their connections. Now the women I work with are very good friends. Their children are very good friends. Their husbands are very good friends. So they've created sort of a larger family that was created around Taipei. And again, I think the experiences that we tried to replicate through Taipei's pop-up dinner events, where we tried to replicate the experiences of communal dining, the way they would eat in Syria. We tried to do the same thing during our pop-up dinners, where we would organize, where we'd put together large dinner tables. They were never tables of 2 or 4. The tables would be for 8 or 10. And so even at Taipei's dinners, people would come up to us at the end of the dinner and say, I made friends. I met new people. I now have a friend. And then I would see the same people again attending another dinner. And so through these experiences of eating together Taipei's food, people made friends in the community. And I see the women, Taipei's team, I see that now they've made friends with Canadians that they probably wouldn't have met otherwise. They met them through the dinners, and they still exchange text messages, and they'll tell me, oh, you remember that woman that came to our 4th dinner? She sent me a message to say Happy Ramadan, or something like that. And all of that was centered around food and exchanging food. And I think before Taipei, I wouldn't have known or imagined that food can be such a beautiful and strong way to connect human beings. But I've seen it firsthand, and it's very beautiful.
Thank you. Yes. I'm also thinking in the context of community-engaged research and community-engaged work that a lot of folks here are doing. And one of the most important things is to have food available to people if you ask them to come into a space with you, for so many reasons that you've outlined already. So thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Vanessa to guide us through the nourishing treat that is on your lap and what we'll be doing with that.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you. Ta-da. Okay. So if you need a dessert, could you please raise your hand and we'll bring you something? Does anybody need some? Okay, perfect. My lovely friend Ilana and also Kathy will bring something to you. So I want to really pay attention to what it is, and you can have more than one as well. As they're passing by, you can pick up and help clear out the plate. So the work that you're doing in the world around community engagement, community-engaged research, I'm suspecting that sometimes you do the research, sometimes you have the communities do the research and they come to you. Maybe you're not in an ivory tower, maybe you're someplace else where the people are as well. But one of the things that we know about community engagement is that it's about paying attention. Would you agree? Engagement's about paying attention? Yeah, and paying attention over the long term. So I'm going to invite you for about 90 seconds to pay attention to the food in your hand. So right now I'm going to invite you, let me just see. Does everybody have a piece who needs a piece? Did you in the middle get yours?
There's one person at the
Okay, perfect. And one person at the back? Okay, so everybody else, while theirs is being brought to them, imagine sitting in the theater and they bring you dessert. I want you just to, so this is a sweet from Taipei, And you will have one of a number of things. And I want you just to observe what you have. And I'm going to say the name, and then Nihal will tell you what it is. And you can determine which one you have. So no eating yet, please. So we have the ladies' bracelet. Nihal, could you tell them about the ladies' bracelet?
So the ladies' bracelet, or Sustenance, is the beautiful rounds of phyllo pastry. It's a round piece of baklava with pistachio and honey on top. And it's very delicately crafted one by one.
Who has the ladies' bracelet? Hands in the air. Okay, no eating yet. We also have Elzrat al-Siyat.
That's it.
That's my Arabic, shukran. That's my Arabic translation of ladies' bracelet. There's also the complex name of date cake. Could you tell us about the date cake, please?
Yep, so this is a date, walnut, and cardamom cake, and that is a recent addition into our repertoire of desserts, and that was done by one of our ladies from Damascus.
So can you look at your cake and see, does it have maybe dates, cardamom? You can smell it? Perfect. And who has the mamul? The mamul is date and sesame.
Yeah, it's a date and sesame, and this one was made by one of the ladies from the city of Nabak, on the outskirts of Damascus.
On the outskirts of Damascus, you are holding a recipe, a piece of history made with hands in your own hand. The last dessert we've offered you is namora.
And that is a fluffy semolina cake with coconut and made by our amazing chef from the city of Latakia on the sea, on the coast.
So the hands that made that cake come by the sea as well. So we're actually kind of connected with this great body of water. The soft, fluffy semolina coconut hands made by the chief chef at Taipei.
Yeah.
Lucky you. So take a little look. Get a good look at your dessert. Really observe it. Oh, I see who's got the cake. Now, what's the scent? What about if you could take just a little bite? Just a little bite. And notice the texture. Notice how your teeth meet the sweet. Right? Pretty good. And what can you tell from just that little tiny bird's eye bite? Can you feel it in your mouth? Can you taste all the flavors? Now I'm going to invite you to take a bigger than usual bite. Like put it in your mouth. Really let it fill up that cavity, your teeth, the top of your mouth, the tongue, the sides, like something you might not do if we were sitting across from each other in a restaurant. And even open your mouth a little bit, because nobody's looking at you but me. Open your mouth a little bit and see how the flavor changes. Different, right? Like when you open your mouth as you drink your wine, or rather as you, when you smell the wine. I just found that out. You're supposed to open your mouth. I'm like, oh my goodness, everything shifted. Breathing in with the mouth open. Okay, friends. Now imagine the person that made it. The little pieces that Nihal told you, see if you can recall. Okay, so now what we're going to do to close up this section, friends, ye community-engaged researchers, I'm going to invite you to speak with somebody close to you, preferably somebody you might not even be seated beside, but a little bit of a, an awkward, oh my gosh, but a little bit of community engagement here. And when you see this sign, this is the silent coyote. Coyote ears, coyote mouth open, coyote mouth closed. So when you see this sign, you raise your hand, and then everybody will see everybody raising their hands, and we'll all know to be like, Got it? Okay, so for 1 minute, I'm going to time you on my grandfather's pocket watch for 1 minute to tell the person beside you, share with each other what you tasted and noticed. Starting now, please. Find somebody. And even if you know each other, that's okay. Jim? What did you notice? What's the last word?
Walnut and then quite fluffy.
Did you have the semolina cake or the date cake? The semolina cake.
I was the cake, I grabbed away my lap when I threw up with it.
Oh, good thing you had two.
Like,
Perfect. Glad that you asked. I wanted to taste some ladies' bracelet. If there's any left, that's what I'm going to go for. This is my grandfather's watch. Isn't that cool? See, that's the second hand right there. Okay, here's my magic sign. I got big sweat. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I just want to let you guys know that you truly are tasting a bit of history, because these recipes are all the family recipes of the ladies we work with. And so these have been passed down from mother to daughter, and so on. So this is truly a bit of history. I've asked Kari if I may add one more thing, just to loop back to the theme of critical hope. I want to tell you about a moment in March 2020 and April 2020 when at one point we had an incredibly great summer scheduled for Taipei with weddings and events and conferences and farmer markets and all of that stuff. And then, you know, over the span of a couple of weeks, we looked at a blank calendar. Every single event we had scheduled was canceled. And I felt that this was a crushing moment where we were looking at nothing. And I remember a distinct moment where I walked into my kitchen looking like just very, very distraught and scared, frankly, because I felt that we were faced with a real threat of closing down, and I couldn't bring myself to tell them that this was a possibility because of COVID. And then I said, guys, we're not doing well, and you know, our calendar's not looking well and stuff. And then one of the ladies looked at me and said, listen, we have thick skin. We've been through war, you know. What are you worried about? She said, have hope. We've been through war, we're here, have hope, everything's gonna be okay. And then when she said that, I felt, you know, I'm such a wuss. What are you worried about? These people are here, I should figure this out. And so I think we're still here, and so we figured it out, and I just want to thank you all for listening to us.
It's very hard to clap when you're holding a microphone, so please know that I have applause inside of me for all of you. So I am conscious that Vanessa has been guiding us through some really fantastic somatic and embodied experiences, but she also has so many insights and wisdom to share on the topic of hope and creativity and solidarity. So I wonder if you could begin by just telling us a little bit about what you do in and with community and how that informs your perspectives on hope.
I would say that I like to practice being as present as possible because I have a poor memory, and it also means that I don't have to remember a bunch of things, but if I stay close to what actually just happened, I can reflect on what Nihal just said. And it's also why I like doing durational work, because it gives me time for my memories and for things to catch up with the way that my head works. So Nihal just said this story, and what I received from it was another affirmation to keep good company. Be in good company, so that when you don't have what you need to get through, the people you are with got your back, right? And if you don't have company, you can literally sit in a chair and just be clear that the people that built that chair had your back in mind. Sometimes they didn't know that you specifically would be in it, but they hoped somewhere that their labor would be meaningful and that somebody could take rest. My work is in music. My background is in performance, like live theater, performance arts, screen performance, music, individual music, collaborative music, like bands, but also choir. I gave up a relationship to the industrial music machine. I really love music and records and other people who have endured that experience of taking the sound of your soul to an industrial machine. But what I was missing was all the other ways that music could happen in a life. And I used to think like, man, I wish I could just be in a little village and have like this simple life and just be in a choir and just be like surrounded by music, which was not the life I was living until I put it down and I came to work here at SFU when this campus was opening as a director of engagement. It wasn't the right fit for me, but what was amazing is that my brother Am was able to take the conversations that we'd started here, and in my process, when I was, my boss was the executive director of Simon Fraser, Vancouver, and Cowan, and I had gone for this leadership training, and I was so nervous, and I saw these people singing sort of outside the conference on this grassy knoll. And I said, oh my God, that's the kind of leadership I'm interested in. That person leading the song, the way that those people are behaving, that's what engagement feels like to me. And so I asked my boss at this campus, and I said, you know, I'm thinking about maybe choir might be a good engagement strategy. And she agreed. And I began that choir in December 2009. And then I guess at about, maybe, did you start 2011, this post? 11, 12? Yeah, so then I did it for the first little while, and then Am did this beautiful work that you're sitting in now, and I can't tell you my endless pride and interest and my fascination with how you work, Am, and how you work with people across so many stratas, and your capacity to be like water, and your capacity to also work with such heart and friendliness and deep intelligence and write books. Yeah. Yeah. I think if anybody ever wanted another example of hope, they could have a conversation with Am Johal.
It's
Yeah.
in the book. I
Yeah.
Am's in the book too.
Yeah. So what was so cool is that after I started this choir, and then it was part of my work here at SFU, and then we decided that I could maintain this choir doing this work here, and I partnered with the social housing upstairs, the Portland Hotel Society, so we were resident there, and for 11 years I ran that choir until October 2020, when COVID made breath and singing literally deadly. And we went online, and that was a really interesting, good experiment for a lot of time, but it wasn't what I wanted to continue to do. Because the thing for me about critical hope, and the thing about music, and the thing about being music, is I really like the personal. I like being with the sound. And sometimes, you know, like I literally felt like, oh, I can't go forward. Oh, I can't go backwards. I'm in a Zoom screen. Somebody let me out, right? And so I just did a lateral move. Yeah, and I moved out of Zoom, and I let the choir rest. And But I didn't stop having music come out of me. Didn't stop inviting people to do it. And one of the other things that I'd really been interested in is, like, in the choir, what I started to see is that so many people like me, they had had this experience where only some kind of people were allowed to make music. Only some voices were permitted. And what I saw in my choir, which was a drop-in choir, we ran 40 weeks of the year. 40, that's 12 weeks off, summertime and Christmas, or the holiday season. And so what I noticed is that this shoulder had maybe about 50 gallons of tears every year, because so many people would come on my shoulder and so happy to sing because they had been silenced. Somebody had said no. And furthermore, they had then believed it and silenced themselves. And it was just this really deep thing that started to happen from the simplicity of singing together that I found it greatly metaphoric and a great teacher on what it is when we let ourselves be silenced, in addition to the systems that will ask us to believe their lies, and when we believe it, how we die in so many ways. And then singing, we're not going to sing today because I'm actually still pretty uncomfortable about inviting people to bring breath with enthusiasm over each other. We're going to just hum and do no harm, because that's where I'm comfortable, and that's what we'll do in a bit.
Beautiful. Well, one of the things that has struck me about many conversations I've had with you is how you render music and creativity accessible to everybody. And I think you just talked about that to some extent. I'll read this short excerpt and then give you a chance to respond to it. You said, "The act of creation is one of hope. I don't think creativity should be the domain of professional artists only. Every person should know they have permission to play the piano, to sing off-key or on-key, to make their own clothes, to make a beautiful pie crust, to sit in the park and do their watercolors, to join an amateur theater company, to do anything they damn well please as a self-expression of being human."
Yeah.
There were so many quotes like this in the section that where I interviewed Vanessa. Like, it was hard to choose even just one quote that was poetic, but this one sticks with me because of this spirit of creativity is not only for the people who get to become famous over it. And this came up last night, actually, for a couple of the keynote and Kari's performance. But can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I sure can. And I'm also going to aim to have us finishing right on time. So Kari, that you met last night, Kari Wendell McClelland, and I've been working at SFU, so I'm working back here again, and I love it. I'm in the lifelong learning department, and Kari and I are co-instructors and co-developing the community capacity building certificate. Jim has been one of our participant learners, and the thing about the imagination and why I'm so excited about everybody practicing their imagination is I find it a strategy for survival. The reason we are on the brink of death is because we've been very limited in what we think our choices are. Not all of us, but those with the most overreaching power have diminished imaginations. And the rest of us have a hard time sometimes remembering how powerful we are and how many other choices are possible, which is why this lateral move, this crab walk, this crossover is really important. So the lack of imagination has us on the brink of extinction. And even if we are to die in all of the horrors that are really profoundly around us right now, there could be a way to sit in this darkness and sing, to dance, to like make whatever you make with your hands and take some pleasure in it, and to be like this human machine that is full of splendor and wonder. And until you keep practicing that, you will forget how imaginative your very existence is. And so that's what I'm interested in, is that as a strategy for survival, every citizen of the planet, every earthling needs to be reminded of the power of their imagination. Yeah, thank you. You know, this word, ashe, that he's saying, this is a word that came with the Yoruba people when we were transported by force across the diaspora. Well, diaspora sounds so generic. When we were transported from the west coast of Africa into southern South America, Brazil, into the Caribbean, and the United States, into Canada. Some of us were up in Europe. And this is a word that means, it's not a fixed meaning, but it's a way of saying, so it is. And may the power of the Creator be with us. And that it is with you. I recognize you. It's kind of like a cross, if you will, between namaste and amen. I never said it like that before, so here's what we're going to do for closing. In the spirit of namaste, the rishis of ancient India, they could hear the sound of the celestial life because they paid attention to it. And the sound of the spheres is Om. And this is the sound that the religious seekers, or let's just say the people who practice Hindu faiths and are the Tibetan Buddhists, they also use this sound, because I don't know about the Tibetans if they had the same, like how they came to that sound, but I imagine that it's similar. And I would like to close with it. As I mentioned, I'm wearing my grandfather's pocket watch today that I wear every now and again, because I think it's nicer than a cell phone to clock my time, literally. But this is on my mother's side, but my maternal grandfather was Hungarian Jew. And so in the spirit of, and you know, that one of the things I really appreciate about the Jews is the use of song. And so in the spirit of, now this is me, I think I pronounce it Tikkun Ulam, Tikkun Ulam, to heal the world. Does anybody, can you say that word?
Tikkun olam?
Yeah, to heal the world. That's what you're doing, right? That's what your research is about. So why don't we close with a almighty a hum and do no harm, and see if you can just pay attention to like how the vibration is feeling in your body. And the thing that's so cool about humming is that it touches your vagus nerve, which is the nerve that helps you know if you should fight or flee or frolic. And just noticing what happens, how you feel now. So I would like you to give yourself a feeling of between 1 and 31. Well-being, maximum 31. Worst you've ever felt is 1, and just clock it inside. And then afterwards, I want you to share with somebody what your number was after this. Okay, and this is how we're gonna do it. We're gonna for 1 minute, but you're going to take your breaths when you need them. But you're gonna try and listen to the ums around you so that like if I stop umming, like so Jim and I are umming, and I hear Jim stop, I'm just gonna pull it up from my feet and keep going till I hear Jim start again, because we wanna keep a sustained sound, okay? Sustained sound. None of us could for a minute, I promise you, right? But together we could. So, how's about we get on our big, strong feet, even if they're tender and twisted and flat and aching. Take a nice breath in, and sit if that's best for you too. And I want you, yeah, Marjorie, for real. But I want you to open up your ears to the sound around you. And I'm gonna put this mic down so that I'm not overwhelming.
you?